Black veterinarian's unlikely friendship with stray animals saves the day. Rain poured in sheets across the abandoned fairgrounds as Dr. Marcus Johnson crouched in the mud, his medical bag open beside him. Blood mixed with rainwater beneath his hands as he worked frantically to save the life of a large German shepherd that lay whimpering on the ground. The dog's breathing came in ragged gasps. "Stay with me, Duke," Marcus whispered, his voice breaking. "Don't you dare give up now." Behind him, sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Flashlight beams swept across the darkened grounds, voices shouting his name. "Dr. Johnson, the dam's about to break. You need to evacuate now." Marcus didn't look up. "2 more minutes. I just need 2 more minutes." The town sheriff, Eleanor Matthews, approached with urgency in her stride. "Marcus, we don't have 2 minutes. That water's coming and half the town's in its path. We need you and that dog of yours." Marcus's hands trembled as he finished securing a pressure bandage. "He's not my dog," he said quietly, "but he's the only one who knows where those children are." The dog's eyes fluttered open, meeting Marcus's gaze with an intelligence that belied his feral appearance. The connection between them was palpable, an unlikely bond formed in mere hours that now held the fate of 3 missing children in the balance. Eleanor's radio crackled. "Matthews, the east section just collapsed. Water's coming through." Marcus gathered the large dog in his arms, struggling under the weight. "If we lose him, we lose those kids," he said, rain streaming down his face. "I'm not letting that happen." The roar of water breaking through the old dam echoed across the valley like a freight train bearing down on them. But let's go back to how this all started. It was just 3 hours earlier when Dr. Marcus Johnson was closing up his veterinary clinic on what should have been an ordinary Thursday afternoon. The bell above the door of Riverside Veterinary Clinic jingled as Marcus flipped the sign from open to closed. After 14 hours of back-to-back appointments, emergency surgeries, and paperwork, the 58-year-old veterinarian was ready to go home. His joints ached from standing all day, a reminder that he wasn't as young as he once was. "That's the last of the filing, Dr. Johnson," said Betsy Coleman, his receptionist of 25 years, as she placed a stack of folders on his desk. At 72, Betsy had refused to retire, claiming she'd shrivel up and blow away without the daily rhythm of the clinic. "Thanks, Betsy. Why don't you head out early? I'll lock up." Betsy adjusted her cat-eye glasses, the same style she'd worn since the 1970s, and peered at him over the rims. "You said that yesterday, and I found you asleep at your desk this morning. When was the last time you had a proper meal that wasn't from that vending machine?" Marcus smiled. Betsy had been mothering him since he'd bought the practice 30 years ago, the first black veterinarian in Millfield, a small town nestled in the foothills of the Appalachians. Those early years hadn't been easy, but time and dedication had earned him respect in the community. "I promise I'll eat the casserole you left in the fridge," he said, helping her into her raincoat. "The weather report said this storm's going to get worse. You should get home before it hits." As if on cue, thunder rumbled in the distance. Spring storms in this part of Virginia could turn dangerous quickly, especially with the old dam upstream from town that had been in need of repairs for years. "Don't forget you promised to come to Sunday dinner," Betsy reminded him. "My grandson's home from college, and he wants to hear about your time in the Peace Corps. That boy thinks you hung the moon ever since you fixed his turtle when he was 10. Marcus nodded, though they both knew there was a good chance he'd forget. Since his wife, Gloria, had passed away 2 years ago from breast cancer, he'd thrown himself into his work, taking every emergency call, staying late, arriving early. The clinic had become his life raft in a sea of grief. After Betsy left, Marcus did a final check on his overnight patients: a cat recovering from surgery, a parrot with a respiratory infection, and a box of orphaned rabbits that needed feeding every few hours. As he was measuring formula for the rabbits, his phone rang. "Dr. Johnson," he answered, tucking the phone between his ear and shoulder. "Marcus, it's Richard Simmons from the town council." Richard's voice sounded strained. "We've got a situation at the old fairgrounds." Animal control tried to handle it, but they're out of their depth. Marcus sighed. Richard Simmons had been the mayor of Millfield for nearly 2 decades. They'd butted heads often in the early days, but had developed a grudging respect over the years, especially after Marcus had saved Richard's prized hunting dog following a run-in with a porcupine. "What kind of situation?" Marcus asked, already reaching for his emergency bag. "There's a pack of strays living under the old exhibition hall. They've been there a while, but with this storm, they're getting aggressive. One of them bit a volunteer earlier. Big German Shepherd mix, looks like he might be the leader. Animal control's saying he might need to be put down, but I thought you might want to take a look first." Marcus checked his watch. It was nearly 7 p.m. and he'd been on his feet since 5 a.m., but the thought of a dog being euthanized without proper assessment made the decision for him. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Tell them not to do anything until I arrive. The fairground sat on the edge of town, adjacent to the state forest and downriver from the old dam. As Marcus drove through the gates, fat raindrops began to splatter against his windshield. The place had seen better days. The Ferris wheel stood rusted and skeletal against the darkening sky, and the once colorful buildings were faded and peeling. He spotted a cluster of vehicles near the exhibition hall animal control vans, a police cruiser, and Richard's town car. Marcus grabbed his bag and hurried over, his boots squelching in the muddy ground. Sheriff Eleanor Matthews stood under the overhang, talking with Richard and two animal control officers. At 55, Eleanor carried herself with the confident authority that came from rising through the ranks in a male-dominated field. Her salt and pepper hair was cut in a practical bob, and despite the tense situation, she greeted Marcus with a warm smile. "Never thought I'd say I'm glad to see you on my day off," she said, extending her hand. They'd known each other since high school. Eleanor had been 2 years behind Marcus, but they'd bonded over being among the few black students in their school during the tail end of integration. "What's the situation?" Marcus asked, looking past her to where the animal control officers were gathered around a large cage. Richard stepped forward, his weathered face grave. "Pack of 5 or 6 dogs living under the building. They've been spotted scrounging around town for months, but no one could get close enough to catch them. Today they cornered a maintenance worker who came to check on storm damage. Man's got a nasty bite on his arm," Eleanor added. "Paramedics took him to the hospital. We managed to trap the one that did it, but the others scattered." Marcus approached the cage cautiously. Inside was a large German Shepherd mix, his tawny fur matted and dirty. The dog's amber eyes followed Marcus's movements with an intensity that spoke of intelligence rather than aggression. One of his front legs was held at an awkward angle. "Has anyone checked him for a microchip?" Marcus asked, setting down his bag. One of the animal control officers, a young man barely out of his 20s, spoke up. "Tried to, but he nearly took my hand off." Marcus observed the dog more carefully. Its body language suggested fear rather than aggression, ears back, tail tucked but alert and watchful. "That leg looks like it's been broken and healed improperly," Marcus said. "He's in pain. That's probably why he bit." The dog's eyes never left Marcus as he spoke. There was something uncanny about the animal's gaze, an almost human quality to his attention. "So what's the protocol here?" Richard asked. "The maintenance worker wants to press charges, says the dog needs to be put down." "You can't put down a dog for defending himself," Marcus argued. "Let me sedate him, check for a chip, treat that leg. He's scared and hurt, not vicious." Eleanor exchanged glances with Richard. "It's your call, but make it quick. This storm's getting worse by the minute." As if to emphasize her point, lightning flashed overhead, followed by a crack of thunder that made everyone jump. The dog in the cage whined, pushing himself into the far corner. "Give me some space," Marcus said, opening his bag. He prepared a mild sedative while speaking softly to the dog. "Easy now, big fella. I'm not going to hurt you." The dog watched him with those intelligent eyes, and to everyone's surprise, gradually relaxed his posture. Marcus carefully slid the needle through the cage bars and administered the sedative. Within minutes, the dog's eyelids began to droop. "I'll need to take him back to my clinic," Marcus said, preparing to open the cage. Just then, Eleanor's radio crackled to life. "Sheriff, we've got a situation at the elementary school. Parents reporting 3 children haven't come home: Hannah Mills, Ethan Porter, and Zoe Chen. Last seen on the nature trail behind the school around 3:30. Eleanor grabbed her radio. "Any signs of foul play?" "Negative. Teacher says they were working on a science project, collecting leaves or something. Might have lost track of time, but with this storm." Richard and Eleanor exchanged concerned looks. The nature trail ran alongside the river, directly in the path of potential flooding if the old dam didn't hold. "I'm heading there now," Eleanor said. "Get search parties organized, call in off-duty officers and volunteers." As she turned to leave, Marcus noticed something odd. The sedated dog had struggled back to alertness and was pawing at the cage door, whining with increasing urgency. "Wait," Marcus said. "Look at him." The dog barked once, then pawed at the cage again, looking directly at Eleanor. "What's he doing?" Richard asked. Marcus had worked with animals for over 30 years, and he'd never seen behavior quite like this. I think he's trying to tell us something." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" "That he knows where the kids are. Come on, Marcus." But the dog barked again, more insistently this time. "The pack's been living near the river," Marcus said slowly. If those children wandered off the trail. You can't seriously think this stray knows something about those missing kids, Richard scoffed, but Marcus was already opening the cage. The dog emerged cautiously, favoring his injured leg. Instead of running or showing aggression, he moved to the edge of the parking lot, looked back at them, and barked again. I think he wants us to follow him, Marcus said. Alina hesitated, then checked her watch. Search parties won't be fully organized for another 20 minutes if there's even a small chance. The dog barked again, more urgent this time. I'll go with him, Marcus decided. You get your people organized. If he leads me to nothing, no harm done, but if those kids are out there in this storm. Another crack of thunder punctuated his words, and the rain began to fall harder. I'm coming with you, Alina said, checking her sidearm. Richard, coordinate with the search parties, tell them to focus on the river trail. Richard nodded reluctantly. Be careful, that dam's been worrying engineers for years with this rain. Marcus and Alina followed as the dog limped determinedly toward the tree line that separated the fairgrounds from the state forest. Despite his injury, the animal moved with purpose, stopping occasionally to make sure they were following. I feel ridiculous, Alina muttered as they entered the forest. Following a stray dog on a hunch. In 40 years of working with animals, I've learned to trust their instincts, Marcus replied, switching on his flashlight as the forest canopy darkened their path. This dog is trying to communicate. The trail grew steeper and muddier as they progressed. The dog stayed just ahead, navigating the difficult terrain with surprising agility despite his injury. The sound of the river grew louder, swollen with rain. It rushed and churned below them. 20 minutes into their trek, the dog suddenly veered off the main trail, heading down a narrow deer path that wound toward the riverbank. The path was barely visible, slick with mud and debris. Watch your step, Marcus warned as they carefully made their descent. The dog had stopped at the bottom of the path, barking at what appeared to be a small cave formed by a fallen tree and eroded riverbank. As Marcus and Alina approached, they heard a sound that made them both freeze, a child's cry. Hello, Alina called, drawing her flashlight. Is someone in there? A small face appeared at the entrance of the makeshift cave, a girl no more than 9 years old, her face streaked with dirt and tears. Help, she cried. Ethan's hurt and the water's coming in. Alina rushed forward while Marcus radioed their location to the search parties. Inside the small cave were 3 children, Hannah Mills, Zoe Chen, and Ethan Porter. Ethan lay on his side, his ankle visibly swollen. We were collecting samples for our science project, Hannah explained through tears. Ethan slipped and hurt his ankle, then it started raining and we couldn't climb back up. The dogs found us, Zoe added, pointing to where 2 more strays huddled protectively near Ethan. They've been keeping us warm. Marcus examined Ethan's ankle, a bad sprain, but not broken. The boy was pale but conscious. You're going to be okay, Marcus assured him. We're going to get you out of here. Alina helped the girls to their feet while Marcus tended to Ethan. Outside, the rain had intensified and the river was rising rapidly, already beginning to seep into the cave. We need to move fast, Alina said, eyeing the water level with concern. That dam won't hold much longer with this rain. Marcus nodded, helping Ethan stand. I'll carry him, you take the girls. The German shepherd that had led them there watched intently, then suddenly barked a warning. The other strays grew agitated, moving toward the cave entrance. What is it? Alina asked. Marcus had worked with enough animals to recognize alarm. Something's wrong, we need to— His words were cut off by a low, rumbling sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The ground beneath them trembled. The dam, Alina whispered, her face paling. Move now. They scrambled from the cave, Marcus carrying Ethan while Alina guided the girls. The dogs led the way, moving with urgent purpose back toward higher ground. But the narrow deer path they descended was now a muddy water slide, impossible to climb while carrying a child. We need another way up, Marcus said, looking around frantically. The German shepherd barked, then began moving parallel to the river, staying just above the rising water line. The other strays followed. I think they know another way, Marcus said. We should follow them. Alina nodded grimly. They had little choice. The dogs led them along a treacherous path that hugged the riverbank while gradually ascending. The roar of water grew louder, and through the trees they could see the river churning with debris, branches, logs, and pieces of the failing dam. Look! Zoe suddenly pointed ahead. Through the rain and darkness, they could make out the silhouette of the old fairgrounds Ferris wheel. The dogs had led them in a wide arc back toward the fairgrounds, but at a point where the bank was less steep. We can make it up here, Alina said, testing the slope. Girls first. She helped Hannah and Zoe scramble up the muddy incline. The German shepherd stayed with Marcus and Ethan, watching their progress with alert eyes. Your turn, buddy, Marcus said to Ethan, helping him toward the slope. Sheriff Matthews will pull you up." But as Ethan began his ascent, a sickening crack echoed through the valley, followed by a roar that drowned out even the thunder. Upstream, the dam had given way. "Hurry!" Alina shouted, reaching down to grab Ethan's outstretched hands. Marcus boosted the boy upward, and Alina pulled him to safety just as a surge of water slammed into the bank where they'd been standing. Marcus lost his footing, falling backward into the rising water. "Marcus!" Alina screamed. The current grabbed him, pulling him away from the bank. In that moment of panic, Marcus felt something grab his jacket. The German shepherd had lunged into the water after him. His powerful jaws clamped on Marcus's coat, dragging him toward a fallen tree that bridged the rushing water. With the dog's help, Marcus managed to grasp the tree trunk and pull himself out of the main current. The dog stayed beside him, soaking wet but vigilant. "Get the children to safety," Marcus shouted to Alina. "I'll find another way up." Alina hesitated, then nodded, gathering the 3 children. "Head for the exhibition hall. It's on high ground." Marcus watched them disappear into the rain before turning to the dog beside him. "Looks like it's you and me now, boy." The dog shook himself, then began moving along the fallen tree toward the opposite bank, looking back expectantly. "You want me to follow you again?" Marcus asked. In response, the dog barked once. With few options, Marcus carefully made his way across the makeshift bridge. The opposite bank was steeper, but dotted with enough trees and roots to provide handholds. The dog led the way, somehow finding the most manageable path through the darkness and rain. They emerged from the forest nearly half a mile downstream from where they'd started, near the abandoned carousel at the fairgrounds. The floodwaters were spreading across the lower sections of the grounds, but the main building stood on slightly higher terrain. Marcus's phone vibrated in his pocket, somehow still functional despite his dunking in the river. It was Alina. "Marcus, thank God, where are you?" "Near the old carousel," he replied, raising his voice over the storm. "The dog led me back to the fairgrounds. The kids. Safe. We're in the exhibition hall with the search parties. But Marcus, 2 of the volunteers are missing. They were checking the lower grounds when the dam broke." Marcus felt his heart sink. "Where exactly?" "Last seen near the old performance stage. Water's rising fast down there." Marcus looked at the German shepherd, who was already alert, ears perked forward as if he understood the conversation. "I'm going to check," Marcus decided. "This dog, he seems to know what he's doing." "Marcus, it's too dangerous. Wait for the rescue teams." "There's no time," he replied, eyeing the rapidly rising water. "This dog saved my life, Alina. He led us to those children. I trust him." Before she could protest further, Marcus ended the call and turned to the dog. "Okay, boy, we've got more people to find. Can you help me?" The dog barked once, then began trotting toward the lower grounds, his injured leg nearly forgotten in the urgency of the moment. They made their way through the abandoned fairgrounds, the floodwaters now ankle-deep and rising. The rain continued to pour, reducing visibility to mere feet. Marcus followed the dog, trusting in the animal's senses more than his own. The old performance stage came into view, a wooden structure now partially submerged. There was no sign of the missing volunteers. "Hello," Marcus called. "Anyone here?" The dog suddenly froze, then darted toward a concession stand near the stage. He began barking frantically, pawing at the door. Marcus splashed through the deepening water and yanked open the door. Inside, 2 people, a middle-aged man and a young woman, were perched on top of a counter, the water already lapping at their feet. "Dr. Johnson?" the man exclaimed in disbelief. "Let's get you out of here," Marcus said, helping them down. "Water's rising fast. We got trapped checking for strays," the woman explained as they waited outside. "That's Bill Henderson and I'm Maria Acaffer. We're with the animal rescue group." The dog led them back toward higher ground, but the water was rising faster than they could move. By the time they reached the carousel, it was knee-deep and flowing with dangerous strength. "We need to get to higher ground now," Marcus said, looking around desperately. The exhibition hall was visible in the distance, but reaching it meant crossing a wide, flooded area. The dog barked, drawing their attention to the carousel itself. The ornate structure sat on a raised concrete platform at least 4 feet above the current water level. "Up there," Marcus directed. "We can wait for rescue." They climbed onto the platform, soaked and exhausted. The dog joined them, shaking water from his coat before sitting alertly at the edge, watching the rising flood. "That dog saved our lives," Bill said, staring at the German shepherd with newfound respect. "He's been saving lives all night," Marcus replied, reaching out to gently examine the dog's injured leg. In the chaos, the animal had reopened an old wound and blood was seeping through his wet fur. Maria noticed Marcus's concern. "Is he hurt?" "Old injury made worse tonight." Marcus tore a strip from his already ruined shirt and carefully wrapped the dog's leg. The animal watched him work without protest, those intelligent eyes never leaving Marcus's face. "He trusts you," Maria observed. Marcus nodded slowly. "And I trust him, which is strange, considering we just met a few hours ago." The dog leaned against Marcus's leg, a gesture of either exhaustion or affection, perhaps both. For the first time, Marcus noticed a faded collar half hidden beneath the matted fur. Gently pushing the fur aside, he found a worn tag with a single word, "Duke." "Duke," Marcus said experimentally. The dog's ears perked up, and he turned to look at Marcus with renewed attention. "That's your name, isn't it, Duke?" In response, Duke placed a paw on Marcus's knee and whined softly. "Someone loved you once," Marcus murmured, scratching behind Duke's ears. "What happened to you, boy?" As they waited for rescue, the waters continued to rise, eventually reaching the edge of the carousel platform. Duke grew increasingly agitated, pacing and whining. "What is it, boy?" Marcus asked, following the dog's gaze. Through the rain, he could see shapes moving in the water, the rest of Duke's pack struggling against the current. Two smaller dogs were being swept toward the carousel, barely keeping their heads above water. Without hesitation, Duke leapt from the platform into the flood. "Duke, no." Marcus called, but the dog was already swimming powerfully toward his packmates. Marcus watched in amazement as Duke reached the struggling dogs, herding them toward the carousel with remarkable skill and determination. As they approached, Marcus leaned out, grabbing the smaller dogs and pulling them to safety. Duke made one more trip, rescuing a third stray before finally returning to the platform himself, exhausted but vigilant. "He's protecting his family," Maria said softly as the bedraggled strays huddled together on the platform. Marcus nodded, a lump forming in his throat. It reminded him painfully of Gloria, how she'd fought so hard through her illness, always thinking of others even at the end. Time passed slowly as they waited for rescue. The storm gradually began to subside, though the floodwaters remained high. Marcus's phone had finally died, leaving them isolated on their carousel island. Duke stayed pressed against Marcus's side, occasionally rising to check on his pack or scan the surroundings. Despite his obvious pain and exhaustion, the dog maintained his protective vigil. "You know," Marcus said to Duke, "I've got plenty of room at my clinic, and my house has been too quiet since Gloria passed." The dog tilted his head, seeming to listen intently. "Your pack, too. I've got connections with the rescue network. We could find them good homes." Duke rested his head on Marcus's knee, those intelligent eyes fixed on his face. "If you're wondering," Marcus continued softly, "yes, this is me asking if you'd like to stay with me, permanently." It was well past midnight when they heard the sound of rescue boats approaching. Flashlights swept across the flooded fairgrounds and voices called out through the darkness. "Over here," Bill shouted, waving his arms. Two rescue boats emerged from the gloom, Eleanor standing in the bow of the lead vessel. "Marcus Johnson," she called as they approached. "Only you would ride out a flood on a carousel with a pack of strays." The evacuation was quick and efficient. As they settled into the rescue boat, Duke refused to board until all of his pack were safely aboard, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed by the rescue team. "That's some dog," one of the rescuers commented. "Yes," Marcus agreed, helping Duke into the boat. "Yes, he is." Back at the emergency shelter set up in the high school gymnasium, Marcus reunited with Eleanor and the children they'd rescued earlier. Ethan's ankle had been properly bandaged, and all three kids were wrapped in blankets, sipping hot chocolate. "Dr. Johnson," they exclaimed when they saw him. Zoe rushed forward, throwing her arms around his waist. "You're okay? Is the dog okay too?" As if on cue, Duke limped into view, followed by a volunteer carrying his pack mates in a large crate. "Duke's going to be fine," Marcus assured her, kneeling down to her level. "He's a hero, just like you kids were brave tonight." Eleanor approached, a steaming cup of coffee in each hand. She passed one to Marcus. "The dam's completely gone," she reported. "Lower part of town is underwater, but everyone's accounted for. No casualties." "Thanks to Duke here," Marcus said, gesturing to the dog who sat alertly beside him, accepting gentle pats from the children. "Never thought I'd see the day when Millfield's most respected veterinarian would be taking orders from a stray dog," Eleanor teased. Marcus smiled, resting his hand on Duke's head. "Sometimes the best teachers come in unexpected packages." Over the next few weeks, as the town began its recovery from the flood, Marcus made good on his promise to Duke. The dog's leg was properly treated, and after a thorough bath and grooming, Duke emerged as a handsome, dignified animal. His pack mates were placed with loving families, including one adopted by the Mills family as thanks for helping save their daughter. Duke, however, never left Marcus's side. He became a fixture at Riverside Veterinary Clinic, often intuiting which animals needed special attention or calming. His uncanny ability to communicate with both animals and humans made him something of a local celebrity. One evening, as Marcus and Duke walked home along the river path, now restored after the flood damage, they encountered Richard Simmons surveying the rebuilding efforts at the fairgrounds. "Dr. Johnson," Richard greeted him, "and the famous Duke, of course." Duke wagged his tail in acknowledgement. "How's the restoration coming?" Marcus asked. Richard gestured to the construction equipment. "Slowly but surely, town council voted unanimously to rebuild, but with improvements. That old exhibition hall is being converted to an animal shelter and education center." He paused, looking somewhat uncomfortable. "Actually, we were hoping you might consider overseeing the veterinary side of things." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Me? The flood changed things, Marcus, showed us what's important." Richard cleared his throat. "Showed me anyway. This town needs what you and Duke did that night: compassion, quick thinking, trust." As they spoke, Duke wandered a few feet away, nose to the ground. He suddenly barked, drawing their attention to a cardboard box partially hidden in the tall grass. Inside were 5 tiny kittens, abandoned but alive. Richard watched as Marcus examined the kittens, Duke standing guard beside the box. "See what I mean? You two are a team this town needs." Marcus looked from the kittens to Duke to Richard, something shifting inside him. For the first time since Gloria's death, he felt a sense of renewed purpose, not just in his work, but in his life. "I'll think about it," he promised, gathering the kittens. "Right now, these little ones need our help. Coming, Duke." The dog was already at his side, ready for their next mission together. In the months that followed, Marcus did more than think about Richard's offer. He embraced it wholeheartedly. The Millfield Animal Rescue and Education Center opened that fall, with Marcus as its chief veterinarian and Duke as its unofficial mascot and therapy dog. The center became a place of healing for both animals and people. Local schools brought students for educational programs. Seniors from the retirement community volunteered, finding purpose in caring for abandoned animals. Families came to adopt pets and often stayed to volunteer. One year after the flood, on a warm spring evening, Marcus sat on the porch of his house, no longer quiet and empty, but filled with the sounds of Duke and their newest rescue, a 3-legged cat named Gloria who ruled the household with benevolent authority. Betsy's grandson, Michael, now in veterinary school himself, sat beside him, peppering him with questions about his Peace Corps days in the 1980s. "Is it true you delivered a baby elephant?" Michael asked, eyes wide. Marcus laughed. "Not exactly, but I did help treat one with an infected tusk while working with a ranger unit in Kenya." Duke lay at his feet, gray now showing around his muzzle, but his eyes still bright and alert. The dog had become more than a pet. He was a partner, a healer, a bridge between Marcus and the world he'd nearly withdrawn from after losing Gloria. "You know," Marcus said to Michael, "before the flood, I was just going through the motions, working all hours, avoiding connections." He reached down to scratch Duke behind the ears. "Then this guy showed up and reminded me what really matters. Saving lives," Michael suggested. "That's part of it," Marcus agreed. "But mostly it's about trust, about recognizing that sometimes help comes from unexpected places and wisdom can be found in those we might otherwise overlook." Duke thumped his tail in agreement, as if understanding every word. As the sun set over Millfield, casting golden light across the rebuilt town, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought him here, from a young man determined to prove himself in a profession where few looked like him, to a respected elder passing on knowledge to the next generation. And at every step, there had been connection to people, to animals, to purpose. Duke rose and pressed his head against Marcus's hand, as he often did when sensing his human's contemplative mood. "You're right, old friend," Marcus said softly. "The best stories aren't about the crisis, they're about what comes after, about how we rebuild together." If you're enjoying this story, please consider subscribing to hear more stories like this. Thank you for listening. If this story touched you, please subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments.